storylines. It could be quite lucky, but then number 13, Andrew Ross. Before that, speaking of number 14, he's round about still on the motorway, yeah. So hopefully the next hour to arrive. So he's driving up from London. So hopefully maybe so pull the lights down. So yeah, Andrew Ross is an ex-Preston graduate. So yeah, he was in the same position as you a few years ago. So I'll hand over to Andy. And yeah, big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Art.Andrew. I'm a partner at a company called Osborne Ross. We're based in London. This is, so that's the two of us in a studio. We both met at a company called Roundel, which isn't going anymore, but then we both went to work at Pentagram, worked in two separate teams. Debbie worked for David Hillman, she did more editorial and hotel work, and I worked with a guy called John McConnell, so I did more identity. And then I went on to the Partners, which is now, it's got a different name now, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Yeah, that's the one, Super Union. And I worked there for a bit, and then I freelanced for about 7 or 8 years, and I was back at Pentagram for that, worked at Johnson Banks. Then we were still at Pentagram, and then we decided to start the company up, and the guys at Pentagram were very kind to us. They knew that we were doing that, and they gave us a couple of clients to start with. We worked with John Lewis and the National Portrait Gallery, and our first clients. So that's a list of the kind of people that we work with. We found over the years we gradually drift more towards the kind of cultural side of things, so working with galleries, and we work with the Royal Mail and the Royal Mint more recently. We've been designing coins for them. So I'll take, Debbie thought it would be a really good idea if I put this in, so blame her. These are the awards that we've won over the years. So I got one of the student ones when I was here, and then we've kind of worked our way through and gathered some of the other stuff up. And your attitude towards the awards kind of changes over the years. When you're first doing them, it's kind of like entering the competitions, and it's great to show how good you are. We use it more now as a way to kind of reassure clients, I guess, that you're half decent, and also a way to remind them that you're still there, really, when you win something. So there's old Clio's. They're expensive to enter. We've only got one of those, and we've got a few of the breakfast ones. So I'm going to go through a few projects. And hopefully explain the way that we came up with the idea for them. So this is Royal Mail. We were asked to design, first of all, the brief. This is what Owen was talking about before, about narrowing things down. At first they said, you can do absolutely anything you want. And wanted us to come up with a really creative idea for some stamps. And the thing that I really like is the kind of limitations, being told you can do this and you can't do that, because being given a completely open goal is really tricky. So we narrowed it down to that with social media, children were sending less and less letters, and they wanted to try and get children to send more in the post rather than using their phones. So what we came up with is like, okay, a piece of paper, how can you make that attractive to kids? Well, a stamp is essentially a sticker now, kids like stickers, and is there a way to make it into a character, something that kind of comes alive and it looks like it's holding onto your post? So what we came up with were a set of stamps that became known as Animail, and these are die-cut stamps. I've got them over there, you can see. They're die-cut out of the envelope. And the idea is that they actually fold around the envelopes, so they look like they're holding on to them. And we weren't sure whether this was going to work or not. Hang on, there we go. I'll show you the rest of them. So it's him. This one was kind of tricky because it's got a lot of black on it. He had to become less black because it messes up the system when it goes through, because they've got a system that kind of reads whether it's first class or second class. And if you've got too much black on there, the phosphor readings don't work. So we had to work on him a bit. So we've got 3 that go around the side of the envelope and 3 that go over the top. And what we had to try and do, he's squeezing the stamp. So we had to, each of them's a different shape, so you have to find a way to draw them so that they all kind of visually look the same size, although they're actually not. And then they, for the first time, they had to work out what the rule was in terms of how far around the back of the stamp you could go and how far down you could go. So this is the set of them all together as a set of 6. They're all first class. So, and these had to be drawn. Normally you just stick them into the rectangle that you're given, but we had to draw all of the perforations in by hand. We wanted to keep those so they still look like stamps, because otherwise they just look like normal stickers. So this is them when they're on the envelopes, and then when you fold them, they go around like that, so they look like they're clinging onto the thing, so then you can send your thing through the post. And we had to do some test ones to see whether it would gum up their machines or not. We did those and they sent them off to their test site and they had to run them through the system to see whether it would work, and nobody really knew, but they did. And this was us this is an old version of Illustrator. You can kind of see how old the job is. So this is us taking the basic stamp shape that we're given and then essentially kind of cutting bits away from it to try and get the shape of the character that you want, just kind of drawing white boxes over the top, trying to get them to work. And this is trying to work out, this is gradually building up the orangutan, and then we've got what we've got. This is the distance down that we were allowed to go. We couldn't go anywhere below there. And then this is the fold line where the envelope was. So we had to draw all of them kind of like this to get them all to work on that. And they said, that's brilliant. Now what we'd like you to do is try and keep track of what the audience reaction to them is. So it used to be that you'd take clippings out of newspapers or magazines, but everything's online now. So we thought what would be nice is to produce something which turned into a newsletter for ourselves. We decided to set ourselves a restriction of doing something that was the width of an iPhone, and then it was as long as it had to be, and we took every comment that anyone made about the stamps. We had these Google alerts set up, and we laid them all out, and we ended up with something which is this. So this ended up being 6 meters long. We then had to find someone that could print it. So we gave it a brief introduction, and then all the way through it, you've got all the comments from people online. The only one we cheated with, Paul Smith, the fashion designer, he said something nice about them. So we had that as the first one on there, but otherwise they're all in order as they came through. This is me. I went over to Germany a couple of years ago and did this design, set a brief for them, a stamp one. And then I gave a talk afterwards, and this is me showing them it. So you kind of get a sense, again, it's up here somewhere, you can have a look at it. But yeah, it's a 6 meter long thing. So they were able to use that to hand around, and then we used it as a newsletter. So this is something for the Royal Mint, and this is an example where you're given a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do. And they asked us to design a coin for John Logie Baird, who's the man that invented the television, except that there's some discussion about whether he did invent it or whether someone else did. And so we weren't allowed to mention that. And they said, you can't show John Logie Baird because no one really knows what he looks like. And you can't show the television that he invented because that's what that looks like, and that doesn't look like a television to anybody. And then the first broadcast, that's what that is over on the right. So none of this is going to make any sense to anybody. So we want to celebrate it, but you can't use any of those things. So went away, and we always kind of sit down and draw the sketching stuff up. This is trying to work out a kind of abstract way of suggesting the idea of broadcasting without actually showing it. And what we, and this, to give you an idea, this is how you work. When you're working with them or with the Royal Mail, it's a design competition, and there's about 2 or 3 designers or illustrators who are given the same brief. And you generally have kind of 6 to 8 weeks to work on it. You've probably got, I don't know, 2 or 3 other projects that you're working on at the time. So the brief comes in, you do your research, then you come up with your initial ideas and you come up with more rather than less, and you narrow it down to the ones that you think are working. And then there's the refinement stage. With the Royal Mint, this is quite a useful thing for us, which is where you start narrowing things down and you can be in discussions with them about what's possible and what isn't, because you're working with metal. And then you send your ideas over. And one's chosen, and then when that one gets chosen, it goes off to Buckingham Palace for it to be approved by the King now. Everything, because it's got him on it, then he has to kind of give it the okay. So this is us working through, you're working on things at 400% and you work at them at actual size, because you always have to bear in mind that this thing, you can work on something and it can look great on screen, but it just won't translate very well down to something small. So this is a whole exercise in kind of reduction and removing anything that doesn't need to be there. It's quite useful. And this is what we came up with. So this is Crystal Palace, where the first broadcast went from. We've got lines radiating out, and they like the idea of having something that's got like a second level of read. So we introduced this idea of a timeline through there that tells you about key points in the life of Logie Baird. And they do it in silver, and they do it in gold, and they do it in platinum. So we've found, normally we have 5 copies of anything we work on, but the platinum one costs £2,500. So we don't have one of those. And we wanted one so that we could enter into design competitions, and it was a real problem to get one out from there because it's like a very, very high security place. And it ended up turning up, this huge bullion van turned up outside the studio, and the man got out and he had an envelope and he had 1 coin inside it. They only gave us 1. So with any competition we entered in, we had to put our names and address on the back, a little bit of paper, and I'd make sure that we got it back so we could send it to the next place. And I'll just show this. So the nice thing about working with them is you show them something and they think in a different way. They're used to working in sculpture and metal. So they said, oh, that idea would work really well if we scalloped it. And we nodded and we both looked at each other and neither of us knew what they meant. But this is it. They kind of carve out the metal between the lines so that as you turn it, it looks like the lines are radiating out, which isn't something that we would have thought of, but that came to them. So you're all helping each other to build up the idea. And then we've done a couple of things with them, and then they said, would you like to do a coin for the Queen? Because it was the Platinum Jubilee that came up. And it's kind of a bit of a scary one. It's fine so long as you don't think about what it's for, because it's quite a historic moment. But there are a lot of restrictions on that. You couldn't put the Queen on there because she's on the other side of it. You couldn't use the word platinum because if you put the word platinum on something that isn't platinum, that gives them a problem. We weren't allowed to mention that it was a jubilee. I think we were allowed to use the word anniversary. They wanted it to make it look celebratory, but as soon as you start to put people on there, they want to know what age the person is, what ethnicity the person is. You get into a real kind of minefield. So we decided to do a typographic solution. Something really simple. We wanted it to look modern and clean. We knew that other people were working on ones that were going to look more traditional. So we wanted, I'll come to that in a minute. This is us looking at different textures. The guys in their internal office send you the different ways of doing the texture. So you can have things that shiny stuff that's done and stuff in between, and you get a sense of what will stand out and what won't. And then they work on it on very large screens and have a 3-dimensional version of your coin. And it shows them where there are bits in the design that are going to be a problem for them. They need to get all of the angles right so that they can actually press this thing out of metal and it's not going to mess up the mold. And then this is the coin being struck on one of the machines. And you get to put your initials on there, which my mum and dad were really excited about. We'd send the artwork off and they said, you haven't put your initials on here. And we didn't know that you could do that. You're not allowed to put your company name, but it's got our initials on there. Yeah, my dad was he was quite pleased about that. And then that's the final coin. And that's how it sat with the others. So the others were quite traditional, so we're trying to do something kind of fairly refined, fairly elegant, that sit with the others, which we hadn't seen, but which looked like a modern tape, because you're doing 50 pence, which is something that's kind of more in common currency, whereas the others were more collector's items. And then we made it onto the front of the Times, so that's nice. Over there on the right. So this is something different. We work with a printer that's not far from our studio, and they had a new way of printing things that they're very excited about. And they wanted to find a way of sending something around to lots of different design studios to see the difference that this printing process made. And normally you do a kind of side-by-side comparison, which is kind of dull but works, which is a kind of, it used to look like this, now it looks like that. But what we came up with was the idea of taking various objects which can affect paper in a way, so like burning, cutting, pins, kind of piercing. And then the idea is that these things look so real when they're printed that they actually have an effect on the paper. So what we did was the poster on the left with the match, we burned it. We had one of those laser cutters, but you can fiddle with the controls, so it actually burns the paper. We took it the opposite way to the way that people normally do. So it gave a real kind of charred edge around it, and it was burned through on the other side. And then this one's, and the one with the scissors is die cut. And then the pins, that was set up so that was actually pierced through on each of them. So this kind of runs through this idea of like photographic object and actually having a real effect on the paper. So this roll of tape was photographed, and then each one of the posters was torn, and then a piece of that tape was used to stick it back together again. And then we had a guy who was a skateboarder who worked at the printers, he sat there with his aerosol can, and he went through and sprayed each one of the posters on the right so that each one was unique and different. This is in San Francisco, they have a design week each year, and some people from a design company called Mucho, who we used to work with at Pentagram, they were given the project of like coming up with an overall theme, and then they asked lots of different designers to do a poster around that theme. And that year it was this idea of unity. And there's something about what Owen was talking about earlier, this thing of looking outside of the design books and thinking about where your idea comes from. I just had this thing from when I was about 7 or 8 years old. There was this magazine called Mad that used to come out. It was an American thing. And every time it came out, it had this thing I remembered, which is where the page folds in and you start out with an image. And then when you fold it, it becomes something else. So this one was obviously about the President Richard Nixon, and the copy changes and the message changes. So it's like this hidden thing that's in there. And I thought it'd be nice if we did a poster that kind of did that, but combined it with a really hard graphic. This is a magazine called Twen, which is a really influential magazine for editorial design that was around in the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of very hard and very graphic. So the idea of taking something that's kind of frivolous and fun, but doing it in this is a spread from that. And you're seeing kind of quite a lot of layouts now that look a little bit like this. So what we did was, so this is Twen mixed with the folding. So we got this poster that doesn't make any sense until it had 4 creases in it, and you fold it together and then you get the word in the centre. So we worked on a book for Vogue. They gave us a call and they said, would you like to work with us? It's like, yeah, great, that would be super. And they said, it's a book about dogs. It's like, oh, okay, all right, come and stand there and wait for that to sink in. This is one of those ones where you design a book and sometimes you know that you've done enough to satisfy the client, but what you're doing is you're adding things in to please yourself. So this was the cover of the book. There was one of the people that worked there was absolutely nuts about dogs and wanted to do this book. So we did the end papers and we used the idea of having houndstooth as a pattern that ran through, because it's like, what's the combination of dogs and fashion? And then when we had the launch, we had a kind of red carpet made. There was a thing in Mayfair at this gun shop, so that everyone could bring their dogs along, and the red carpet was made, but it was made up in the houndstooth pattern, which was nice. And there were these little characters from like the 30s or 40s that they were quite small in the magazines, but what we did was we took those from there and then we got them running around the pages. So when you take the dust jacket off the book, there's the dogs running around the bottom of the book looking at the words. And then the rest of it, the layout, it's kind of what you used to call a pentagram. It's kind of good housekeeping. You've got lots of images coming from lots of different sources. So you have like a very rigid grid to hold the whole thing together. It's like kind of visual glue that holds it together. And the great thing about them was they used to send bikes over with these really priceless images on them that they just left with us. So we had these Richard Avedon or Helmut Newton images from the 40s. I don't know how much they were worth, but they just used to give us this stuff to use as reference. Then we got another, this is another book that we worked on. And books are quite a good way of meeting people who are really enthusiastic about subjects that you don't know a great deal about. And there was a man, a collector, who had what was the only set of prints of photographs that were taken on Captain Scott's journey, the last journey that he did up to Antarctica. And all the others had been destroyed, the plates weren't there, so these prints were worth rather a lot. He wanted to do a book of them, so that became this, which is probably the whitest book that we've ever designed. I think very little ink used on this one. And what we used was we found his notes from his diaries, which as you're going through the journey, his writing becomes more and more scratchy as things are becoming more desperate, and we scanned that for the divided pages. And then we were given all these maps that we didn't understand, because it's kind of different. You don't just have land and water down in that area. You've got certain bits that you can go across. It's icy at certain times of the year, and then it's water at other times. So we figured that if we did the maps in a way that we understood, then hopefully the public would understand that. And where we could, we tried to bring the images alive, so having a sequence of images showing this man trying to take a photograph and the blizzard coming in. And what you learn as you're going through them is that they killed, suddenly the horses disappeared. I remember being in the meeting and saying, oh, where are the horses gone? And it turned out that they killed the horses and then they ate them. And then a little bit later, the dogs are gone because they shoot the dogs as well. And you get through to the end and there's just the men that are pulling all of the equipment along by themselves. This is something else for the Royal Mail, another little problem that they set you. So they ask you to do stamps to do endangered insects, and the problem is that they're endangered for a reason. So you go online to look for photographs, and you've got one of these, and they tend to be photographs taken by amateurs who are kind of really well-meaning, but not the greatest photographers. And the insects tend to blend into their backgrounds. And what we figured we were trying to do on this one is kind of just remove everything from it, to kind of pull everything back so that you just admire the beauty of the creatures. So we got in touch with the Natural History Museum, and they have lots of samples like this that stretch back to the 1920s, but they've got kind of pins through them, and they've got bits missing off them, like especially these kind of delicate bits on the ends of their legs. So we had to go through an exercise, having them photographed, and then sending them to a retoucher with images of the live ones, so that he could take that and turn it into that. So they kind of get a bit desiccated, so you have to kind of fill them out and bring the colour back. And this is how they turned out. And the idea, if it's an idea, is that they're scampering across the stamp. And we wanted to remove everything from there so that you actually see how beautiful the insects are. So everything on there is, we're just kind of pushing it all back, and our job sometimes is just to remove everything from there. It's like you're clearing the floor so that the star of the show can get through. And this is another stamp one, I'll whiz through this, but sometimes you learn things as you're going along. We worked on some space ones with NASA and the European Space Agency, and they sent us all these beautiful images. This is one of Saturn that we were going to use for the first cut, and we did a visual of it, And it was working really well, except that body down there was getting in the way in front of the lettering. So I retouched it out and sent the thing over to NASA, and then we got a message back saying that I've just taken out the Earth. would I mind putting it back in again? Because it never ever crossed my mind. I never thought about it looking back that way. I guess it's because I always think space is kind of out from the Earth. So we had to put that back in. That was a humbling moment. And this is how they turned out. And this was an exercise in actually working with a copywriter, and the copywriter, we had to work on the words in terms of how many letters each word had in them. You've only got this tiny space to work in. So you're trying to get a fact that's kind of interesting in there, but you've got a very, very limited space to work in. And the other problem was that black ink thing that came up again. You know, I said about on the back? Well, they said, oh, on these space ones, we want you to remember, don't have too much black. And space is kind of, there's rather a lot of that. So we had to make sure that we got the right percentage of planet to background. This is a job for a charity. D&AD put them in touch with us. They deal in, show you how bad homelessness is. There's a charity that just deals in homeless Scottish people in London, and this is Borderline. And they work from a small, they're really lovely people, but they work from this rundown office around the back of Victoria Station. And we went for a meeting with them, and the thing that Owen was saying earlier about kind of getting down through the brief, discussing things with people, it's amazing what you can learn in a conversation with people. You go in and you just get them talking about what their day-to-day life is, what their experience is. And at some point in the meeting, somebody said that came out with this phrase about looking forward and looking back. And I've learned over the years that when someone says something and you think, that's the idea, I know what to do now, then you don't betray that in the meeting. You kind of keep a poker face, you go away and think about it, and then you come back with it. So this was a brochure based on that idea. And what we did was we took the, I've got to go back. Took the homeless people, and we introduced them on each spread, and we used the physical action of turning the page. That on the left we got them to write down what had happened to them, all the awful things that had led up to this point where they'd become homeless and they'd had to get in touch with the charity. And then you turn the page, and then you turn the page, and the person's introduced you properly, and then we got them to write down what they were hoping, what their hopes and fears were for the coming year now that they've got in touch with the charity. It's that turning point from kind of something bad to hopefully something good. And we got we borrowed a studio for free, and the photographer, he donated his work for free, and the printers we paid costs on those. And this guy, it's kind of strange, we didn't know how the shoot was going to go, because you've got two homeless guys turning up. We had such a great day. This guy didn't realise that he was going bald on the back of his head until he saw that. So that was interesting for him. And he became kind of a bit shy, because when you're doing the shoot, you can see on a big screen, as you take the images, they come up. And he had a kind of gap in his tooth that he hadn't had anything done about. So we couldn't get him to smile for love or money. That was the best that we got from him. And then this is James, who was a shepherd who moved to London. I don't know what he was thinking. And he had become homeless, and again he wrote down it was a similar kind of mechanism. And he told us at the end of the shoot he didn't have any pictures of himself since he was age 10. So he asked us if he could have a print from the shoot, which we gave him. And then we said to the organisation, if we're going to do that with the homeless people, we should treat you in the same way that we treat them. Everyone should be on the level playing field. So we got the chairman and the director to pose for a similar shoot, and they wrote down how their year had been as an organisation, and then what they were hoping for in the coming year. And the nice thing about that was sometimes you work on a job and you think you've done something good, but you kind of go away from it and you work on other things. But this one, they won. This is like kind of the equivalent of D&AD for the charity sector. And they were up against people like, who were they up against? prostate cancer and the RNLI and Site Savers, organisations far bigger than them, which they had far bigger budgets, and they won the annual report award, and that meant that they then increased their funding, and things got better for them. So that was nice. And then what the other thing that you discover is if they like what you've done one year, then you get given the same problem the following year. So you've got to find another way of saying the same thing. So this is the following year, and we did an annual report using one person who'd had mental issues, and using this idea of white rubbish in the street, and having a photograph of him that gradually unfurls as you go through and you find out about the treatment that he's had, and you gradually get to see the whole person by the end of the brochure. And this is always one of those things that you work on. You work on other stuff, but this one was really nice because, and I still have quite a deal of affection for it because you saw the effect that it had for the organisation. This is an example of where things that are outside of your control, you find that things happen that you had no idea were going to happen, and you can do a good job and it can still go wrong. So this was, we were approached by an American lady who was going to launch an ethical clothing company. She came from, her family came from India, and she was going to have the clothes made over there by a collective that she knew of, and then it was going to be sold over here. And we were asked to come up with the names for it. Here's some of the people working on this stuff. We were asked to come up with the name and come up with the logo. So we came up with the name Woven, and we presented that to them as a mark. And I think I spoke to her husband first, and he said, love it, bit of a problem, my wife can't say that word. And we had a meeting with her, and I don't quite understand. Every time she tried to say it, she said woven, and we couldn't get her to say woven, and we realised that if the CEO of an organisation can't say the name, then you're not going to be able to go ahead with it. So then we had to go, right, okay, we'll go away and think of something else. So then we had another thing, and we came up with this, which is ink, so using that negative space thing. And what we quite liked about that is it's a logo that's kind of almost completed. It's like your mind fills in what's going to happen with it forming, and she liked that. She was able to say that, and we kind of went through the process of showing kind of how it would apply to things and how you can extend the idea so you can use it for the different collections that you're doing, and how it will work on the web, just trying to make it look a bit more alive for them. But then that happened, which, to be fair, we did a presentation about 2 months before it, and then she put the job on hold because she was having trouble with the people in India about the supply chain. So we said, okay, fine, and everything was on hold, and we were working on other stuff. And then this TV series with the titles, which were designed by someone that we know who used to work in London, who's now in New York, came up with, and we all saw it at the same time, and it was like, okay, what do we do? We can't really go with this because everyone will think that you've just kind of copied this TV series that you've seen. And then the whole thing kind of fell on its arse a bit because the problem with the supply chain didn't work, and it just kind of died a bit of a death, really. Something that's really nice when you go off out into the real world, which I hadn't quite realised, was this idea of being able to work on ideas with other people. It's not just you anymore, you can collaborate with illustrators or photographers. So I've got a couple of examples of these. This is a man called Charles Barsotti who, first of all, develop a poker face when the client shows you the stuff that they're doing at the moment. This was our accountancy firm, and they said, this is our current kind of newsletter, what do you think? And it was kind of all over the show. So what they wanted to do was, their brief to us was make us look friendly and more approachable. It's kind of, everything's simpler. It's like, right, okay. So what we decided to do was work with Charles, because we're designers, I always stare blankly when our accountant tells us stuff about how we're doing. So the idea was to have a little character that we came up with that looks kind of clueless, that runs through all all of the literature, who's essentially an everyman. And we were going to get him to do the drawing. And the idea was that you take an object, photographed, and then it's kind of drawing around it. So this is us trying to work up ideas. They do a lot of work with the agriculture sector because they're up in Lincoln. So this is us trying to come up with ideas, and there was a kind of ping pong match between us and Charles. So this is an image for financial forecasting. And he hadn't worked in this way before, so he found it kind of strange that we would kind of explain it. So we're going to photograph an object and then you draw around it. And he started to like it. So this is another image about the free market, which actually proved to be really difficult because the Photoshop does not like to scan coins or notes we discovered. It's got hidden software in there that says that you're trying to counterfeit stuff, so that was quite difficult to do. And then we produced brochures, and the idea was to strip it right back, lose all of those gradated fills and strange typefaces. This is the man escaping from the confines of the VAT return. And these were some of the other thoughts that were worked through. So it worked, it covered all of the bases, and hopefully it made them look different to other accountancy firms. This is something for the Royal Mail, working with a photographer called Nick Turpin. And the Royal Mail had a set of stamps already designed, and with those stamps come on this thing called a presentation pack. It's like this fold-out card. And they said, the stamps are quite straightforward, so we'd like you to do something and make it a little more lively. So what we suggested was sending Nick into the National Portrait Gallery, which is a collection of images of the British public, and then pulling out these interactions, because strange things happen. When people are these two are stood there discussing this image of Ken Dodd, but it actually looks like there's a conversation that's going on. So we sent him in there for 2 or 3 days to try and capture things like that. And this is a glass wall. And we have this kind of bet on. He managed quite early on in the shoot to get one person behind one of those. None of this is staged, it's all him shooting it as he stood there. So the bet was to see if he could get 2 people at the same time. And then we had the objects looking at the people that were looking around, so reversing things. And then this is a lady who's explaining to a set of school children about painting, and she doesn't realise that she's looking like she's touching the lady up. And then that's how it appeared in the document, and these were the stamps that we were working with, so we did those with a person that was shot in the gallery, so it looks like that picture's on the wall. And then the last one of these, this is an illustration pair called Sue Huntley and Donna Muir, who work together, and they do a lot of murals and big projects. And we were asked to do another one of those packs, and it was for sea life, and we were just supposed to put squared up photographs of seals and stuff. And I remember in the meeting saying, wouldn't it be great if we could draw them on the sand and then photograph it? And they said, do you think that's possible? And I said, yeah, I don't see why not. So then we had this thing of trying to find the right kind of beach where we could shoot this. This is Sue and Donna, they're doing a test. We had to find out how big they could draw these things. They started out small, and then they gradually worked up bigger and bigger until they got so big that they couldn't see the other end of it, and they didn't know where they were going. You kind of lose track, because when you're down flat, you can't actually see that. It's only when you're up on the cliff that you can see what's going on. So we did this test, we worked out where it was going to be done, and then we turned up on the day, and you'll notice that there's a set of men's genitalia at the bottom of that was where we were meant to be doing our drawing, because we'd worked it all out, and we had this area where these rocks were, and that's where the tide was going to go. And we turned up, and there was the photographer, us two, one of the clients, and an assistant, and we all went to the edge of the cliff, and I heard someone say, oh shit. And I looked over the side, and there was a 10 or 11-year-old boy who was with his mum, and he was walking around with a stick looking bored. She was sat in a little deck chair, and completely unknown to her, he'd drawn that, which you can see, there's some Donna, it's about 30 foot long. And the first reaction was, we're screwed, because you're on the beach and you've got a certain amount of time before the tide comes in. We had a time restriction. So I remember Sue or Donna saying, don't worry, I think we can rub it out. So we've got, I was looking for it. I can't find the image I wanted to show you. There's a picture we've got of these two middle-aged women on their knees, kind of down there, rubbing this thing, and we had walkie-talkies with us because the reception wasn't good. And I can remember saying to Sue, you're making the line that it's getting thicker, right? A ball. So then we were running up and down the cliff trying to figure out where on earth we could do it. So in the end, we actually decided to change the angle, and we did it there, and then we had to move some of the rocks around. And we ended up sending off the artwork, and in the borders of the artwork, it's still got that. We had to send it to the Royal Mail. These were the final images. And I remember someone saying to me, couldn't you have just done that in Photoshop? And I guess, yeah, you could have, but actually it was like this real adventure. It was great going off down there and doing this with them, finding the right beach for it. And we had a little copy of the tide times that told us what time the tide was in and out, so we could work out when we were going to do it. And then we got them to write the word sea life, which was the title of it, upside down they had to do it, and in a certain place, so that then when the thing folded up, and you can see that the water's just coming in there. So that was the back of the pack, that's the front of the pack, and then that's the bit inside. And somewhere off to the right, if that hadn't been cropped, there's a cock and balls. We like doing logos because logos for us is like that's a real simplification, and it's taking things down to their minimum. It's removing everything from there that doesn't need to be there and just seeing what's left, and that's your mark. So this was for a fashion designer who just left what was Central St Martin's. He's doing menswear, and his name was Emmanuel Saint. So we did a logo for him. Simplest piece of artwork I've ever done. Drew a white rectangle and then moved it down until it was in the right place. But that's that. And then this is for a booking print. We're working on a project at the moment, and the company's called Domino Books. So this idea of books leaning against each other, but also toppling dominoes, we like that. And this is for a film production company called D&AD, and there's the initials of the three guys. Yuri was our client, the U at the end. So we took the serif on the G and flipped it to make the horns of the creature. Got it. Oh, and you've seen that one. And this is, wallpaper. You've got all this stuff with wallpaper on here. We did something, I thought I'd include this because I thought it was similar. Photographer we're working on a project with at the moment, he was having his final MA show, and he asked us if we could help him. He'd done a photographic exhibition that was to do with it, like the local neighbourhood that he lives in and his neighbours, and he wanted something that was cheap but which would suggest the idea of the suburban area. So what we did was we bought some wallpaper, anaglypta wallpaper from Homebase, and we wrapped that around it to make the dust jacket, and then we had the special staple put on there, and then we bought the really cheap key rings so that he could put his address in there, and then he could either have those clipped onto it or he could have them separate so he could hand them out. The exhibition was called Next Door, and that was the cover, and then the inside spread for it with his kind of what it's all about, and then his photographs and the descriptions of them, all quite straightforward. And then that's the business card that he was opening. He had a jar of them at the exhibition, and because he was showing with other students, we got into wallpaper, his area, with that wallpaper. And the nice thing was, when we had them printed, we were using a printer in Leeds, so we didn't have to specify the paper. We just sent them a link to the Homebase site, and they went to their local Homebase and bought the wallpaper to do the covers of the books. And these are a couple of other things. So this is a poster. We were asked to do a poster for. There's a guy called Massimo Vignelli who designed the New York subway map, and he was going to be 90 years old, so we were asked to do a poster for that. So that's what we came up with. And that was another one that we did in lockdown. That was a response to the idea of lockdown. So taking the masthead from Life magazine and then kind of tearing it up and kind of having it still torn but battered, but still holding together. And because of that, we put it up on Instagram, and then we were contacted by a picture editor at Life magazine in New York, we were talking to them about whether we may do a project together, so that would be good. And then this one, something we've been working on through lockdown, there's a rap band called Wu-Tang Clan, and we're working on a book of photographs of them. And this came about, we were in a private view, an exhibition that was kind of okay, but we were just about to leave on a wet night in the centre of town. And then I got talking to this guy, and he was a photography student, but in a previous life he'd been the tour manager for the Wu-Tang Clan. And he said, oh, I've got thousands of photographs back home of them, like on the road, and I don't know what to do with them. And he said, what do you do? Because we hadn't said at that point, and we said, well, we're graphic designers and we design photography books. So we kind of stood there looking at each other for a minute, and then we exchanged cards. So this kind of became a lockdown project that kept us sane. So he sent these couple of drives over, and we spent rather a long time going through looking at all these pictures that he'd taken on the road. And we're producing a book at the moment. We were due to produce it about a year or so ago, but because of the war in the Ukraine, about 70 or 80% of the starch which is used, I didn't know this before, 70 or 80% of the starch that's used to make paper, the potatoes, come from the Ukraine. So it's messed up the paper industry. So we had to put the project on hold, and we're about to launch it again in a month or two. We're going to have it on Kickstarter. So we've pretty much got the book designed. Oh, this, if you've ever wondered what a new business meeting with the Wu-Tang Clan is like, that was it. We sent our work over to LA, and a guy called Power, who's the kind of behind the scenes management guy, never had our work called cool shit before. I always feel like the whitest guy in the room when I say something. And they liked, the thing that they really liked was we'd done a book for the Buckingham Palace, and there was it's strange what people like. This was a book about Queen's Gold collection. And we did, so this is a thing called Tipu's Tiger, which is huge and solid gold, and it's at Windsor Castle. And we had it photographed. They've got, there's St James's Palace, and then the palace next to it is their photography studio. And they photographed it, and it was decided that it wasn't good enough, so they had to get Tipu's Tiger back again from Windsor Castle. So every time it's kind of armed guard delivering this thing. And the first time that I went to St James's Palace for a meeting, if you're ever asked to go there, take 4 pieces of ID, because I only turned up with 3, and I walked in looking all pleased with myself, kind of waved, saying hello to the policeman, and within a few minutes I was back out on the street again because they wouldn't let me in. And I had to ring the client and reschedule the meeting because in my haste I'd only picked up 3 things. So this was the book that they said that they liked. So this is like a collection of the Queen's Gold. And that landed us a job. So this is our kind of working cover at the moment. This is just a visual. Well, we're looking at the idea of using the kind of scratched up flight cases from the tour and having that wrap around the cover, and then having live is the working title. We're still figuring out what that's going to be. And then these are some of the spreads. So this is an instance of you going through all of the images and you're editing down, and what you're trying to do is not have the same thing on every page. So we go through each venue. So this is in London, and then we've got break pages through there. So the book's got some kind of ebb and flow to it. So we've got lyrics of theirs, and we were looking at taking a font and then distressing it with texture. Close up, so you've got quite a lot of these kind of on the road things, and it's following through them. So we're here at Glasgow, and he gets pretty close to the guys on stage. So we'll hopefully that will. Oh, and that's them looking kind of slightly clueless on one of those, you know, the little buses that take you from the plane to back to the airport. So he got to take one of those, and that's kind of it. Listening. Does anybody have any questions, I guess? Anybody? Anything? Yes.
You said that in a meeting you didn't show that something was a really good idea.
Oh, yeah.
why was that?
Oh, what I mean by that is you then go back, if you're in a meeting and you're talking through, you're having your initial chat with them, and they suggest something, and suddenly in your head you kind of think, that's the answer to it all, that's exactly what it should be. Then I've learned not to say that, because then they'll wonder why you're charging them for going away and thinking about it for 2 or 3 weeks. So the best thing is, because you're kind of earning your money because you've spotted this kind of connection, so you go away, think about it, because it does need working out, and then you go back with it. I guess that's the thing.
Have they ever, you go back with it and then they said, well, I thought that.
No, because to them, that's the funny thing, because they're not thinking in visual terms. So they're a really interesting client in that they're very good at describing in words what they did and what they felt about what they did. And that's a joy of the client, really. When you get a client who says, I don't know what I want, I'll know it when I see it, that's when you've got a real problem. But they were very good at describing it in words, but they couldn't make that leap, and you suddenly realise that that's what you bring to it. Because it's obvious to you, but it isn't obvious to them, and they don't see that connection. They probably didn't even remember that they said it, but there's that kind of pivotal thing, and it's how you can take something that someone said and turn it into a visual. Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Maybe it wasn't clear. Anybody else? Logo design. I don't know, it's kind of part of the job. We don't just do logos. We like to do a mixture of things. I mean, you depending on what you like to do, there are some design companies that just do packaging, or there are some that just do annual reports. That was never really. I like things I like to mix things up, and there to be that variety, so that. For instance, at one point we had 2 screens up on the screen, and we had the thing for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and we had the Wu-Tang Clan on the other screen. And we're working on both of those, and you kind of, if one gets stalled, and you don't quite know what to do on that, then you move across to the other thing. And you've just got it, that one you've got at the back of your head while you're working on the first one. And we find that sometimes if you stare too hard at the problem, you can't see the answer. It's almost like you see it out of the corner of your eye. If you're working on something else, then you've kind of got this thing ticking over, and you think sometimes you'll come up with something when you're not thinking about that project. It's good just to be able to dodge and weave. But logos is one of those things. It's one of the things that I enjoy most because it's the most reductive. It's the simplest. You're removing everything that doesn't need to be there, and all that you've got left is what needs to be there. I quite enjoy that as an exercise of breaking things down. Anything else?
I just think the craft you put into your work is like just wonderful, really. I think
that's not a question, but that's great. I'll put up with that all day.
Yeah, I was just picking up about our students. They come with great concepts. And how do you visualise it? How do you work on that craft?
Well, it took me a while to realise. I think when I left college, I thought that the key thing to me was the idea, and I thought that I'd kind of done 90% of it when I came up with the idea, and I kind of relaxed. But I realise now that it took me a while. Maybe I'm a bit slower than everybody else. You realise that the idea is there, but then your job is to really make it sing. And what you're doing is, I can only describe it. When I had my first tour in a Pentagram, they used to have this 3D workshop, like rather than doing stuff in scanning. Oh, sorry, there's a point to this. They used to have a real workshop, and they were working on the new London cab. And I remember walking in there, and there were 3 men in white overalls with like sanding paper and stuff, and they had a full-size model of a cab in there, and they were all kind of just walking around it, kind of checking the lines on it and seeing whether it was right, and then just kind of like kind of sanding a bit down off it, and then standing back and looking at it, and then working your way around. And I think that's the bit that that's the design side of it, is what you owe yourself. You give yourself the time to kind of just walk around this thing that you've done and see it's just getting the balance right between removing everything that doesn't need to be there and then seeing what you've got and then maybe just kind of tweaking it, adding a little something until you've got the balance just right on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I've ever spoken out loud and said it like that before, but that's kind of how it feels. It's so that, because some of the projects that are in here, hopefully they all kind of look like they've got a consistent look, a kind of consistent approach to them. I think that's it. What you want to do is, I think, is to not develop a look to your work, because then you know what the project's going to be like by the end, like before you've even started, and you know what your result's going to be. What you're looking to do is develop a consistent approach to your work, so that you don't know what you're going to end up with. You can surprise yourself. Sometimes you come up with something and then you think, I don't know where that came from, like doing a poster that folds and kind of has these 4 lines and folds and things. I wouldn't have known that I was going to do that, but you kind of have your approach towards the job and you follow that and you see where the idea takes you, I guess. And it's the same with whether it's a logo or a book, and hopefully that means that the advantage of us being a 2-man band is that we've got consistency, I guess, or consistency of approach. The disadvantage is that we've got consistency of approach, I suppose. You don't have the new blood coming through the company, so you're not developing new angles, but it does mean that hopefully things that we did 10 years ago sit comfortably with stuff that we're doing today. I guess that's what I'm saying, is this kind of thread that runs through. But thank you. No? You got a question? It's not about ChatGPT.
No ChatGPT.
Because I know the answer to that. We've had that a couple of times.
I would say thank you, as Pete said, it's just so clean, so rapid, and so simple.
That's the idea.
You've got some samples here as well.
Oh yeah, if anyone
people
wants to
see
see.
Captain Scott book or the Gold book or
Yeah, I'll put the stamps
cool,
on that.
actually, flick through, but we're going to have a break. Mr. Jo has arrived, she's in Preston. Yeah, so
she's not here yet.
she might be. She's going to walk up the road at the moment. Yeah, so she's here. Rachel's going to bring her in, yeah. So we've got a bit of a break, but 3 o'clock for the final talk today. Yeah, raffle. And you come and have a chat with Andy and over the sample.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anyone wants to come and have a look?